Every system you have ever tried has worked for someone else. The morning routine that changed someone's life. The workout program that transformed someone's body. The productivity method that made someone rich. All of it works. The evidence is there. And yet you have tried versions of all of it, and here you are, still in the same pattern, still restarting the same habits, still wondering what is wrong with you that you cannot make it stick. Nothing is wrong with you. But you have been solving the wrong problem. You have been treating this as a discipline problem, which means you have been looking for better systems, stronger willpower, more motivation, the right habit stack, the perfect morning schedule. And none of it has worked long-term because discipline problems are solved by systems, but what you actually have is an identity problem, and identity problems are solved by something else entirely. Here is the difference, and it matters more than anything else in this video. When you try to build a habit through discipline alone, the structure looks like this. You decide on an outcome you want, you design a behavior that produces that outcome, and you attempt to force yourself to perform that behavior repeatedly until it becomes automatic. The forcing mechanism is willpower. The problem is that willpower is a finite daily resource that depletes with use, gets depleted faster under stress, and is completely unreliable across the long timelines that real change requires. This is why your habits survive when life is easy and collapse when life gets hard. The system was never load-bearing. It was held together by willpower, and willpower buckles under pressure. Identity-based change works differently. Instead of starting with the outcome you want and working backward to a behavior, you start with the person you need to become and work outward to the behaviors that naturally follow from being that person. The behavior is no longer something you force yourself to do. It is something that person simply does, because it is consistent with who they are. A person who identifies as a runner does not negotiate with themselves about whether to run today. A person who is trying to run negotiates every single morning. The behavior is identical. The internal experience is completely different. And the long-term sustainability is not even comparable. The reason this matters so deeply is that your brain is constantly scanning its environment for identity-consistent behavior opportunities and identity-inconsistent behavior threats. This is not motivational language. It is how the brain's self-concept system actually operates. Psychologists call this self-verification theory. Your brain actively works to confirm and maintain its existing self-concept, even when that self-concept is negative. If your self-concept includes the belief that you are someone who starts things and does not finish them, your brain will unconsciously create the conditions that confirm that belief, not because it wants you to fail, but because consistency between self-concept and behavior is neurologically rewarding in a way that contradicts your conscious goals. This is why you have likely noticed that your discipline failures feel strangely familiar, like a pattern you keep returning to even when you consciously desperately want to break it. You are not weak. Your brain is doing exactly what it is designed to do. It is protecting the consistency of its self-concept with extraordinary efficiency. The implication is significant. Willpower-based habit systems are trying to override a deeply ingrained identity signal using a resource that runs out every afternoon. Identity-based change works with the brain's self-verification system instead of against it. Once the identity shifts, the brain begins creating conditions that confirm the new self-concept rather than the old one. So how does the identity actually shift? Because this is where most people get it wrong in a specific way. The common mistake is to declare the new identity and then try to live up to it. To say today, I am a disciplined person, and then expect the behavior to follow from the declaration. This does not work because the brain does not update its self-concept based on what you say about yourself. It updates based on evidence. Specifically, on the accumulation of your own behavioral history. Your current identity, whatever it is, was built by thousands of small actions repeated over years until your brain accepted them as definitive evidence of who you are. You cannot overwrite that evidence with a single declaration. You can only overwrite it with new evidence, accumulated the same way the old evidence was, action by action, day by day, until the weight of the new evidence becomes undeniable. This means the path to identity change is not a grand announcement. It is a quiet, consistent accumulation of votes. Every time you perform a behavior that is consistent with the identity you are building, you cast one vote for that identity. The votes do not need to be dramatic. They need to be consistent. A 10-minute workout casts a vote for the identity of someone who trains. A single page of reading casts a vote for the identity of someone who learns. Getting up when the alarm goes off the first time casts a vote for the identity of someone who does not negotiate with their own commitments. None of these individual actions are impressive. Their accumulation is. Now here is the part that nobody talks about, and it is the part that will actually make this practical for you. Before you can build the new identity, you have to audit the current one. Because you are operating from an identity right now, whether you have examined it or not. And that identity is producing your current results with perfect consistency. Take an honest inventory, not of your habits or your systems, of the things you believe to be fundamentally true about yourself as a person. Not what you wish were true, what you actually believe at the level that generates your automatic behavior. Do you believe you are someone who finishes what they start, or do you believe, underneath all the intentions, that you are someone who eventually quits? Do you believe you are someone capable of the level of discipline required to reach your actual goals, or do you believe, at some quiet level you rarely examine, that that kind of discipline is for other people, people who are wired differently, people who had better circumstances, people who are not you? These beliefs are not truth. They are conclusions your brain drew from prior evidence, and prior evidence can be overwritten. But you cannot overwrite something you have not first identified. The audit is not comfortable. It is not supposed to be. It is the first act of honest self-examination that most people in the self-improvement space are actively avoiding by consuming more content, downloading more systems, and reading more books instead of sitting quietly with the question of what they actually believe about themselves. Once you have identified the current identity, the next step is to choose the replacement with precision. Not "I want to be more disciplined." That is too vague for the brain to use as a reference point. The more specific the identity statement, the more efficiently the brain can begin scanning for behaviors that confirm it. Specific means something like, the kind of person who protects their morning before the world gets to it. The kind of person who does the hard thing first and the easy thing after. The kind of person who keeps the commitments they make to themselves with the same seriousness they keep the ones they make to others. The kind of person who does not need to feel motivated to act because acting is simply what that person does. Write the identity statement down. Not as an affirmation you repeat. As a working definition. As the answer to the question, "Who am I choosing to be?" stated clearly enough that you could evaluate any given behavior against it and know immediately whether that behavior confirms it or contradicts it. Then start casting votes. Small ones. Today. Not Monday. Not after you feel ready. The first vote is the most important one because it is the first piece of new evidence, and your brain, which has been running on old evidence for years, finally has something different to process. There is one more layer to this, and it is the reason identity change produces a fundamentally different feeling than discipline-based change. When you are operating from identity, the question you ask yourself in the difficult moment changes completely. The discipline-based question is, do I have enough willpower right now to do this thing I do not want to do? That question is exhausting to ask and increasingly difficult to answer yes to as the day progresses and willpower depletes. The identity-based question is, would the person I am becoming do this? That question does not require willpower to answer. It requires only a moment of checking your behavior against your self-concept, which is a process your brain is already running constantly and efficiently. The answer either confirms your identity or it threatens it, and the brain strongly prefers confirmation. This shift does not make hard things easy. Nothing makes hard things easy. What it does is change where the effort goes. Instead of spending energy forcing yourself to act against your identity, you spend energy maintaining an identity that makes the action natural. That is a fundamentally more sustainable use of the same human resources. You do not have a discipline problem. You have always had the capacity for discipline. The evidence for this is that you maintain extraordinary consistency in dozens of areas of your life that align with your current identity, in areas where you already believe you are a certain kind of person. The areas where your discipline collapses are the areas where you are trying to act like someone you do not yet believe you are. And no system, no routine, no streak app, no accountability partner can bridge that gap from the outside. The gap is internal. It closes from the inside. Decide who you are. Not who you want to be eventually. Who you are choosing to be starting with the next action you take after this video ends. Cast the first vote. Then the next one. Then the one after that. The identity follows the evidence. The behavior follows the identity. The results follow the behavior. It was always in that order. You just did not know which end to start from. Start from the right end now.